On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we talk about post-campaign sales. We discuss building demand, direct sales versus retail, and also how to use intrigue to sell your products by leading with a sentence into a paragraph and into a page. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his marketing level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? I must be using Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined by Sean and not Rick. In replacement of Rick, we are joined by Juli Bierwirth of Distant Rabbit Games. She produced an awesome game called Mantis Falls, which I've actually never played, but it just seems like there's so much depth to this game. I'm really excited about it. But then she managed to sell 45,000 units of this as a first time. I mean, this is your first game, right?
Yeah. This is our first title.
And you did that. So we met at the Gamma trade show a couple of weeks ago, where you introduced yourself to me and said, I've listened to your podcast and it helped me sell 45,000 units. And we're like, we have to have you on to talk about how and what advice did that and whatever. So that's kind of setting the stage for what content we're going to talk about. How a first-time publisher took a passion project and sold 45,000 units of it, which I think everybody wants to hear. So, but first, I'd love to have you just simply introduce yourself. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And how'd you get into design? And set the stage for us.
Sure. So, I came from a lot of different places. I've had a very windy career path. But prior to doing anything with games, I was actually in the food industry, particularly in nutrition and food science. So doing a lot of research on what foods are healthy and the chemistry behind that. And that was when we were first working on Mantis Falls. I was working in a chemistry lab all the time, looking at blackberry antioxidants. And so very academic, scientific background, which I think actually really helps for this kind of thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, the logic behind it obviously helps with game creating and game playing, but the science-driven mind is also very helpful with marketing because,
scientific method. I would preach it like left, right, and center.
Exactly. And so I was a registered dietitian. I was getting my PhD in food science. And I was also dating who is now my husband, Adrian, and he and I were long distance. And we loved games. We played a lot of 2-player games virtually, but we particularly loved some of the kind of bigger group hidden traitor games with a couple of caveats. Adrian would always get really frustrated whenever anyone does kind of the witch hunt thing, where it's like he'd be explaining the logic of like, okay, it has to be this person because then this person voted this way and that, and people would be like, he's talking too much. He's a witch. And he would get so frustrated. I was just like, oh, I hate this. Just if you're the person who's talking, everyone's like, he's trying to convince me of something. And so he was in his first year of teaching food science. So we had met in our food science program. And when he gets really stressed, which is his first year of tenure track professorship, he tends to have these big bursts of creativity in one direction or another. And so he called me up one night. It's like 2:00 in the morning to tell me that he'd been up for 3 days working on a board game for us. Where we were going to be something about the mob and something about streets and street lights and stuff. And I was like, oh, sure. It sounds, we'd never made a board game before. I mean, this really seemed like he was kind of losing his marbles a little bit. But yeah, he would be proctoring his exams. And while he's furiously trying to write out text for cards. That's awesome. And so he finished with his semester. We were back together for the summer, and I tried it out for the first time. I thought this is the best hidden traitor game I've ever played. It was just for 2 players, which just, there's no real deep hidden traitor games for 2 players. It just, we'd always wanted that.
You're always trying to convince the mob that you didn't do it or that they did it. And
exactly.
I'm already intrigued.
It's a big us versus them group mentality kind of a thing. And with 2 players, there is no witch hunt. I mean, who am I? If I shout out he's a traitor, who am I shouting that to? Nobody. So
Yeah.
it's all very internal and very intimate.
Yep.
And also the betrayal is really, really intimate and intense, which is great for romantic partners.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I'd done art in a previous life. So I'd originally gone to college for art before I switched over into the food and science track. And so I told him, I could do art for this. But I mean, at the time we didn't know that self-publishing was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
We were thinking this is going to have to be if we ever wanted this to be real, it would be something like a pitch to Hasbro or Parker Brothers or, one of those old school game companies. And, figured if we do that, we're going to lose all the creative control. So we pretty much just made it for ourselves. We had it in an old Zazzle printed box, like one of those wooden keepsake boxes. We didn't even know you could get prototype boxes printed. And it was just for us for the first several years. It was just the game that the two of us play, and that's it. And our son and our my mother-in-law were players, but I mean, it was really we weren't really intending to share it with the world, or thinking that was an actual possibility.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of how this all started.
That's awesome. And you've actually interested me enough that I need to buy this right now. I just
do you want to put it on pause and like hop over to Amazon or our website or something?
No, it's already my order's being processed now. Like I'm order 2111.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, that's funny.
Really
I
intrigues
just
me.
got the notification on my phone.
That's awesome.
I can't believe you actually did that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so first of all, just just more of, I guess, a tangent or a digression, but I'm always on the hunt for great 2-player games that I can play with my wife. And
did she like
typically,
being betrayed?
Well, the thing is, I hate social deduction because I'm so good at it. I at one point I went semi-professional with poker, so I kept track of a bankroll as I and I figured out how to be profitable playing online. And this was right before the US got Poker Stars and Full Tilt Poker in big trouble, and everyone had their accounts frozen. I actually cashed out and just decided I beat the game. It was either go professional or just decide that I was done here. And I actually have a friend who went professional and has like 4 bracelets on the World Poker Tour or the World Series of Poker. He's hit the final table like several times and has like 5 Lamborghinis in his Vegas home, which is this massive, it's really cool. He was actually the head of Twitch Poker for a long time, and he actually started Twitch Poker and whatnot. And it was like, do I want to do that, or do I want to just like be normal? And I decided be normal, and my wife and I kind of met through poker. And so anyway, I got out of that, but then bluffing and like acting, I feel like I have these natural leanings toward those things. Yeah. And so I'm a really good liar. I convince myself of these things.
But your wife already knows that, which is the important thing, right?
Well, but the thing is, I can rile up a mob, and get everybody to trust me. So if we're playing Mafia or Werewolf, like she always dies first. She always gets killed first because then everybody trusts me.
Because you kill her.
Yes, and it was the witch hunt thing, but I'm the one that And so anyway, I hate that about myself. It's actually like the worst, because
so if Andrew ever pays you a compliment, don't listen to it.
Yeah. So I feel like it's just that type of, like you said, your husband hated the witch hunt thing because it was just this mob mentality, and I knew kind of how to take advantage of that, and I just felt like winning the game didn't feel good. It just didn't feel good.
Yeah. So to me, what we wanted with this was a little bit a different style of winning. So there's a 3-player version, and that does have a little bit more of that social element. But in this one, I mean, you definitely have to be able to lie effectively, because you are talking to a partner who's going to have to believe what you're saying, and you're lying on your feet about the stuff that you have and the stuff that's coming and all of that. But at the same time, what we wanted it was to be a lot more strategic than a lot of other games. So it's a combo driven action card play. There's things that you're fighting together. And instead of, you look at the, Dead of Winter, things like that. Like a lot of the hidden traitor games are vote against the common good, right?
Yeah.
or sabotage the mission or something.
Mhm.
This is if you're in sort of this mob rule town, and you're presumably we're witnesses who are trying to escape this town with our information, and if you're an assassin and I'm a witness, then my goal as a witness is to kill you before you
Mhm.
kill me. And so it's a very
Okay.
direct head-to-head, the same tools that we would use if we were both witnesses and we were trying to actually defeat
Mhm.
the events that we were dealing with. Now we're going to turn against each other. So it's a much more direct head-to-head thing. And actually, I mean, it's good that your wife already knows that you're good at lying and that you guys met through
Yeah.
poker, because we do find sometimes that intimate couples have some trouble with this one, because
Yep.
it depends on the nature of your relationship, but
Yeah.
it can be a little mean if there is a betrayal, and it can be a sort of a tell about how good you are at lying,
Uh-huh.
because it's a long game kind of lying.
Yeah.
And so people will sometimes get, like 2 hours in to a longish game, and then have the tables turn and be like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, how did I not know you're
Yeah.
a snake? So we've had a couple of people who, especially when we were doing it in early days, when we were reviewing, some of our reviewers were like, this is amazing, and my wife hates it. Like,
Yeah.
she cried afterwards. But on the flip side, it's also one of the most cathartic co-op victories when you actually are both witnesses.
Yeah.
It's you can't quarterback that victory because you don't
Yep.
trust each other. So you have to actually not only hold up your own end of all the cooperation instead of letting somebody else manage it, but you also have to figure out how to trust each other, which is really challenging to do.
That would be great.
That's pretty
ad
cool.
copy for Facebook. Made my wife cry. Put that in quotes.
I don't know how. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if we got a slew of orders off of that, I'm not sure what I would think about the nature of
awesome.
relationships in the U.S.
Well, I want to pause right here and just kind of talk about the relevance of the theme and the draw. I think, first of all, it's really cool that you guys came up with a game that solved a problem that, your husband primarily was like, I hate when this happens. How can we make a game like this, which we both like, that kind of eliminates the problem of mob rule? And I think that that's very smart. It was a very clever idea.
Well, I mean, the other thing that
Innovative.
he managed that I'm really impressed with, and I can say, I didn't design the game. So
Yeah.
the other thing that he managed that was very impressive to me was that there were no 2-player hidden traitor games. Now I think, the newest one that kind of falls into this genre is Inhuman Conditions. It's an asymmetrical, like a Blade Runner kind of a, are you a robot or are you human? Plays in 5 minutes, and it's awesome. We've played it. We love it. But I mean, the kind of thing like Battlestar Galactica or Shadows over Camelot, any of the classics in the hidden traitor space, there's just nothing for 2 players. It doesn't exist. Because if it's not me, it's you. And that's it.
Yep.
So his sometimes cooperative thing where we're either 2 witnesses together or we're a witness and assassin. And from my perspective, if I'm a witness, it's a 50-50 shot that you're an assassin. It only works under very specific circumstances, because if it's just the 2 of us and I'm an assassin, why don't I just come out and start killing you right away? Right. And so he had to build in reasons why I couldn't just start killing you right away, why I'd have to build that trust temporarily until you're in a dire situation where I can now actually attack you. And he had to build in all of these double-edged action cards so that you can, if somebody sees a card that's in your hand or sees something that you discarded, you can always sort of plausibly bluff why that happened. There's no, revealing yourself as an assassin. There's no somebody sees your roll card or anything like that. And so it's all just this deep strategy of you could try and bait me. You could say, I'm in a terrible situation. Can you help me? You have that gun and those bullets. Why don't you defeat this guy?
Yep.
And then I shoot you instead, and you go, hey, just kidding. Wasn't in a terrible situation, but now I know who you are. So it's a game of cat and mouse. It's very psychological. And it kind of just hit every box that we were ever looking for. And so for us, that was kind of the magic of it being just ours for a long time. It's like with the 2 of us were playing it every night, maybe twice a night when after our kids went to sleep. And I mean, it sort of felt like this experience I could never explain adequately to other people, because most of our friends weren't really game players. Our parents aren't going to learn them. It's a medium weight game. And so it was sort of like our own thing for a very long time. But it seemed that the niche that it fell into, the need that we felt for it, was a wider need, which is why then it seems like it's succeeded once we've actually gone to market with it, which is great.
Yeah. So that's one of I find the toughest things about a game like this is that, if I were to market this, I would say, okay, how is this unique and how is this different? And what I would naturally hear would be, at first, semi-cooperative. And I would immediately think of Dead of Winter. It's on my shelf behind me somewhere. And I really like Dead of Winter.
I see it right there. Yeah.
I don't like the traitor mechanic is, again, like you said, mob rule and whatnot. But I find a lot of the semi-cooperative games either boil down to, I could be a bad guy or I'm trying to win. But, there's this monster that we all need to defeat or we all lose. Or, I guess there's this, I can't remember, this Robin Hood game where you're all trying to win. But if certain things happen, then you can all lose. So you have to come together at limited times to escape people out of jail or other things like that. But I think
there's the semi-cooperative realm, which we're not quite like that. The semi-cooperative is sort of like you have reasons to cooperate at times, or almost like a kingmaker scenario at times.
Right.
But this being the sometimes cooperative falls into kind of a different category, because you're playing one of two games. If we're both witnesses, we only win if we both escape the town together. One player dies, the other one loses. So if I accidentally kill you, I've lost the game. I don't know which of those two games I'm playing. I'm either playing the game where I have to save you or the game where I have to kill you, and I don't know. So it definitely. We were trying to kind of avoid a lot of the stuff in other games that we played where we wanted it to be head to head. We wanted it to be not a vote against the mission kind of a thing. We want it to be highly strategic and very internal, and quarterbacking for the co-op, and it kind of hit everything, which was really fun.
That's amazing. And now it puts it into this highly thematic realm, which I will say becomes a lot easier to market. It just appeals a lot more, and it's this very particular type of experience that you can say certain people will not like this and should not buy it, and we're going to hate on it, and then other people are going to love it so much they're going to be your advocates and champions and say, this is my favorite game of all time, and which I think is really cool. But I think what makes it really difficult is to explain, especially as the people who made it, to explain it to someone else so that they hear what they like about the game. I think that this is true with a lot of games that are truly innovative like this, where you're like, how do I explain it? Like, what do I say? And that kind of thing. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what your kind of trial and errors were like in marketing, because you did a lot of this stuff yourself. And so what did you find that you thought would work that didn't? And what were things that you tried that surprised you that worked very well?
Sure. Yeah.
As far as like positioning.
Yeah. So the idea of how to give that first impression to people. So we had a little bit of a leg up in that we realized relatively quickly, we kind of took it for granted after a while that this was a hidden traitor game for 2 players, that you could play this at 2. But we realized as we were doing things like going to PAX South back in the day before it was canceled, that jumping off with that was a really strong start, because most people who do hidden role stuff have never seen anything for 2 players. So if we can jump in with that usually is enough of a starting hook that people will, even if they're not necessarily interested in that genre, will stick around to say, wait, how does that work? So that was really helpful leading with that unique aspect of it. We tried some stuff where more storytelling. You're in the 1940s in a mob rule town. You've seen something you weren't supposed to see. You can't escape the town alive. Or you need to escape the town but it's unlikely you'll be able to do this alone, but you're not alone. And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of like a little mini paragraph of just create the scene, create the tension. So that's the back of our box to kind of draw in some of that intrigue. That seemed to work pretty well as well. When we started to get into the nitty gritty of you're a witness and there's a 50-50 chance that the other player is an assassin and all of that kind of stuff, that's where we start to lose people unless they're already hooked in from one of the other things. That's where we'll go if we're trying to explain how it works.
Yep.
If to somebody who wants a slightly longer pitch, but having that really short, the one sentence, a strategic immersive hidden role game for 2 to 3 players. Just giving the thing that's gonna not that it has to sell the whole game itself, but that it has to lead them to read then the paragraph, and then the paragraph leads them to read the page. And that was kind of the progression of figuring out what is that one sentence, what is that paragraph, what does that page look like, and yeah, that took some time. I mean, we ran Facebook ads. We explained it to people. I'm sure the first people we ever tried to explain this game to wildly confused. We had a lot of conversations when we would go to conventions where we're like, man, I'm really just struggling to explain this in a way that's, I mean, the designer problem where you're like, okay, it does this and it's, and I also forgot it also does that. I think from Adrian's
people are checking their
perspective,
watches and like, oh yeah, great.
It's so embarrassing.
Or they're really thinking I'm hungry.
Yeah. So I think from what we sort of realized over time, we got our pitches down both for online formats, for copy, for in person, but we also realized that me not being the designer initially, it was a little bit easier for me to make that pitch because the pitch was made to me. I didn't create the game. I got the pitch from Adrian, and I can tell him and I can tell anyone else exactly the things that appealed to me about that. He at the beginning was a little close to it. And it's hard as a designer to be that close and to not want to share all the things you're most proud of that you designed, or all the things that, that you think make it special, not what a customer would see. Yeah. And so that figuring that out was really helpful. And that's when I advise other people about their crowdfunding projects. Anyone who's a solo project creator who's going to Kickstarter on their own, I always recommend that they get a partner who can be their pitch man, who can hype people up, because as the creator, sometimes you can be a little too close to be able to explain it succinctly in exactly the way that other people are going to be drawn to.
Yeah. In the film industry, this is exactly why directors traditionally don't cut their own films. Is because they have too much emotion on certain shots in the scenes that I spent all day getting this shot. Well, an editor can look at it more objectively and say, well, it doesn't really enhance the story.
Well, that's true for trailers too, right? Yeah. Like the director, a trailer made by a director would probably be wildly different than a trailer made by a company, an outside company.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why you get so the director's cut, because it's like the director's like, well, this is how I wanted to do it.
Yeah. I hated the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League so much. I hated it. I wish I never saw it and that I could have those 3 hours of my life back. But I think everyone else feels the exact opposite, where like I loved Batman versus Superman, and I loved of course the Justice League and whatnot.
I only just started watching those movies. Not even Justice League. Like I just watched Aquaman,
Captain America
for the first time.
Okay.
Yesterday. Yeah.
Well,
a little behind.
Yeah, it's the most fun thing about DC is like what happened with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and so otherwise it's not really that great. Stick to Captain America.
That's the most interesting thing about DC.
Yeah, nice. That's the most interesting thing. So I'm sure I'll get a lot of flame for this, but I'm just I'm opinionated. I have a podcast and I say things sometimes. So what I loved that you said about kind of trying to distill down, you went to a lot of conventions, and tell me, if this is correct. You went to a lot of conventions, and you, through trial and error, you figured out what drew people in, and you made a lot of mistakes, and you learned, you kind of honed your pitch over time. And was that specifically, and you mentioned Facebook ads, but was that dominantly through conventions? And then also, as you said, through being a layperson yourself and picking up a design?
Yeah. So I would say, I think conventions, well, okay, we got a little thwarted because we went to PAX South, was our big like launching, like we're gonna come out into the world and let people try it, and that was January of 2020. And so we had other things on the
Good
docket.
timing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and it was the last PAX South also. So we had other things on the
It's about
docket.
30
and those
minutes
all got
south of me.
canceled. Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's, yeah, I didn't realize it. Well, you might have been there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think the great thing about conventions is that with Facebook ads you can spend a lot of money, right? And Facebook doesn't care. They'll let you just keep spending it. They're happy to take it. So
they love money.
Yeah, they do. So with an in-person pitch, and it's a little different than copy still, right? But with an in-person pitch, I can see how excited somebody is based on what I'm saying. And so I can do this trial and error. And then with the next person and the next person, as I refine it, I can watch. I mean, I've got the pitch so down at this point. I've done it like so many hundreds of times that I know in general when people are going to smile, when they're going to laugh about, the scenario that I'm presenting them. So if I can then use that as my proving ground for the pitch, I'm not spending a ton of money on ads. And instead of it being just a metric like, click-through rate or something like that, I'm actually getting to see the emotional portion of it, the reaction that people have and how they might feel or respond to something. Not just oh yeah, I really like worker placement games, but like oh wow, that's an interesting story, like that deeper level of excitement. And so that definitely informed. We did that long before we ever did Facebook ads, and that really informed our Facebook ads a lot because we had a sense of what combination of words, what starting sentence and then following paragraph were going to be the things to pull people in. And I think if you're good at reading faces, if you're good at reading body language and how people are receptive to a story or a thought, that's a really great way to lead off, going to conventions over and over and seeing how people respond and not being biased on that, where you're not trying to sell them your game per se. I mean, at PAX, we didn't have a game to sell. We were going up to the Kickstarter. And it's always nice to sell a game, but the bigger picture is, instead of me convincing one person at a time, would you please buy my game? And then I get that sale. And it's like, okay, yay, one sale, right? That's lost time. You're just going to do that over and over for the rest of your life. If I can use that experience to get a broader picture of what people want, what they like, what will cause people in mass to respond to a larger campaign, then that's a higher value proposition than a single sale.
Yeah, we often see this problem with our clients where this is the danger of digital marketing, is you're looking at numbers, and it's easy to forget that behind those numbers are actual people, and people come in various levels of enthusiasm for your game. And then the danger is, because you're looking at numbers, you start optimizing your ads for numbers. It's going to get the lowest cost per lead. It's like, well, if you keep on optimizing for that, you might find people are less enthusiastic of your game. So
you're getting 70-year-old grandmas from India that don't want to buy your game.
So you have to kind of look at like the data collectively of kind of knowing whereabouts you are and how your community, or as you're growing, is engaging with your content. So with all that being said, how did you get in contact with, I suppose, the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast? I know that you spoke to Andrew at Gamba saying how you've been listening to it for quite a while. How did that journey come about?
So I think, I'm trying to remember who interviewed you. Maybe it was Nolan way back in the day. There's somebody who did an interview, a 2-part interview with you.
Gabe Barrett, 2-part. If it's 2-part, I think it was Gabe from the Board Game Design Lab.
Yes, thank you. Board Game Design. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was like 2019 December or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the one that I listened to over and over, and I was sitting there taking furious notes. I mean, it was like 3 hours of content. And this was not maybe the first I'd ever heard of it, but the first really concrete information on how to run Facebook ads. And I'm going to preface this all by saying Facebook ads are awful. That platform is terrible. It's so unintuitive to work with, and bad customer support. I mean, it is a slog to figure out how to do that yourself. So having a little
AI.
like
I upgraded to an official whatever they like a verified badge and got banned from ads because I did that. It's like, your credit card didn't work. Fix it. Oh, you didn't fix it in time. You're banned from ads. It's like, what in the world
that
is that? I
happened to
paid
us.
you money and you banned me.
I know we were like mid Kickstarter campaign, and there was something where they're like, we're going to stop all your ads for like 7 days because we need to verify what country you live in. And I'm like, why didn't you do that earlier? Yeah. What sense? And so we had to like jump on with customer support back when they had customer support. They barely have customer support now. It's a big thing. They have tried to do everything without having interaction, which creates some serious problems. If you ever get hacked as a business on Facebook ads, anyone who's going to do Facebook ads, please turn on two-factor authentication, because people are often their business account is tied to their personal account. And you probably created
the personal account gets banned and the business account
or hacked or something like that, and people can run through your money. This happened to us. My husband and I, we've each other Facebook accounts for like years and years and years, and my husband's had one very old email address on like Hotmail or something from when he was 14 that was still associated with this account. And it got hacked in one of those, like password releases. He hasn't touched that account in like 20 years. And it got hacked, and then they got into Facebook accounts, and then they got access to our business account. And then they spent, this is ridiculous, they spent like $2,000 in an afternoon on ads for stretchy pants, like women's leggings that like hold your tummy in. Very strange.
That's probably collecting credit card information. So.
Yeah.
And we don't really think about it because, you set up a business account and we had a really strong password and all that kind of stuff. But because all of those Facebook business accounts are tied to personal accounts, all they have to do is get access to your individual account. And then your business account is compromised. And so we went through that, and then we tried to go through Facebook, their customer service, and there's just nothing at all. They'll send you to robots, and then they'll close your case. And so don't let yourself get hacked. It's a big pain.
Yeah. And I will say, while we're on this topic, that there are many times. So one time, and I've shared about this on the podcast once, I got banned before I had any redundant secondary access to our business account. This was back in 2020. I got banned from running ads because I was advocating for a cyber terrorist, like a crime organization called Legion. But my client was Legions of Steel from Marco Picota, and they were miniatures that had guns, and I got chastised for, selling guns, and then also advocating for cyber terrorism and organized crime.
Shame on you.
Right. And so ridiculous. Like, one human takes a look at this and is like, oh, this is crazy. I'm going to get this unlocked right now. But I talked to the support, and they're like, sorry, this decision is final. There's nothing they can do about it. Well, I had several accounts that were running at that time, running ads, and I was locked out, and the Facebook was still running the ads. And I realized, like, all of these Kickstarters, like, some of them are active, some of them are going. Thankfully, that everything was kind of smooth sailing at that moment, but it was scary, and I had to make a change that I couldn't make. I had to, 7 days until an account had to get paused, because the Kickstarter was ending, and it was scary. And I finally, through multiple attempts, I got rejected and said, this decision's final. And then I found a place that I could submit an apology, and I did. I apologized profusely, to the king. I kissed the ring of the king, and they unblocked me. And I immediately added all the redundant accounts.
It's nice. It's nice that they take apologies into consideration.
Well, they did back in 2020. I don't know. Their hearts are probably more hardened than they were then. I fear Facebook, Yeah. So redundancy is so important. Having
Yeah.
a secondary access.
So that's all a diversion to say that, yeah, Facebook is challenging. And
Yeah.
if it weren't for somebody who was giving us, like you, who was giving
Yeah.
us a lot of lead in of what kind of an audience to create, what are you looking for? You really don't want to limit yourself. You want the algorithm to limit it for you, but you do want certain guardrails in place. You don't want to advertise to
Yeah.
everyone in the whole wide world. You want it to be, crowdfunding specific customers because they're a unique breed. You want it to be board game people. People are interested in board games in general. Generally people, for us, we did a little bit of a guardrail for people that are, speak English or are in the United States or, and then, yeah, we had that kind of jumping off point of here's the way to set it up to begin with. And not to say it wasn't awful, because it was. Working Facebook ads ad manager is not an easy tool, but it would have been incredibly difficult without that lead off of how to optimize at the very beginning. And also, I think I had no idea even Pixel existed, that was a thing that you could do. So that's that all was so logical in my mind. Like when you were kind of walking through all of that stuff, it wasn't just, oh, here's what somebody is telling me to do. It all made so much sense, that I came back and I was like, Adrian, we need to set up some Facebook ads. I've been listening to this podcast from this guy, and he's saying, here's the way to set it up, and here's how the pixel works, and and so that was how we started our first foray into getting creating that initial audience.
That's fantastic. There is a lot of work that is required. Like you said, the learning curve of this is so high. In fact, we actually created our Crowdfunding Nerds course to solve this problem for people that maybe didn't want to spend all the money with us doing it for them, but needed additional help. And we had we launched our course like last year, and it's been a really, really useful tool. If anybody listening to this wants to go get it, it's crowdfundingnerds.com/course. I think you can go to crowdfundingnerds.com and then find it in the menu. But we found that people's number one hang up is always, how do I get started? It's one of two things usually. It's, how do I get started? I have no idea where to even begin. I have some money to spend, but I want to just make sure that it's spent wisely. And there are all of these technical things that I just am having so much trouble with, or I'm scared to even get started because of all of these technical things. And like you said, what do I do? Like these guardrails, like how do I put things in place that I'm not just going to lose money hand over fist? And then the second thing, oftentimes we find from clients, the reason that they hire us is because they may have that expertise and they may have that ability, but they just want someone that they can trust to do it. Because as a publisher, you've got a million things on your plate.
Oh, yeah.
You just need somebody that's 95% as good as you to take it over so that you can offload a task and then focus on other things.
We're the famous example of the do everything yourself, oh, your Windows broken, I'll replace that myself. Like, I don't need to hire somebody for something. We hired one person, and it was to create a board game arena adaptation. And for the rest of it, other than, obviously we'd use freight forwarders, we'd use manufacturers, those are people that we hired for just specific jobs. But in terms of the actual, any of the marketing, Adrian did all of the web design. We did, all the art, all of the game design, all of the marketing, all of the social media, everything ourselves. And partly, I don't know that we would do that again. We also did all the fulfillment ourselves, which was a terrible. Don't do that.
Oh man, 6,000.
Don't do that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was the worst week of my life. I came back like absolutely crippled. And I'm in a weird way, I'm glad that I did it, because it gives me so much more appreciation for people who work in warehousing systems.
Yeah.
But
this is like the biggest self-fulfillment I've ever heard of. For those that don't know, you went to Kickstarter, I want to say around 2020, 2021, something like that. You had over like 6,500
almost,
backers.
yeah, almost 7,000 backers. It was crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah. So we didn't do, I mean, those of those, the United States backers were about 4,000, but yeah, no,
Oh,
we did it in a 1-car garage, over the course of a
wow.
week with, just family, basically.
I was going to say, like,
Um,
how many pizzas did you buy for friends and family?
Only one.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you make your pizza?
We're very bad people, incredibly abusive of our laborers.
That's awesome.
It
Well, it's
was,
time to cash in. You've probably given so much to them.
yeah. I mean, we figured out a lot about the system that way. And
Yeah.
also, I think one of the great things about doing everything yourself at first is that
Mhm.
you see what things you want to do yourself, and then also what things are worth handing off to somebody else.
Mhm.
And then also kind of the soft spots, like, gosh, when we did all of our fulfillment ourselves, I then in retrospect, I found these boxes that would have saved us so much on shipping. It's smaller, they work really well. So we use that for our direct fulfillment now. They
Mhm.
fit our game perfectly. And they're easier to put together than the ones that we used. And so,
Yeah.
you just find those solutions to problems. You wouldn't have known to look for those solutions if you weren't doing
Mhm.
it yourself. So that part of it is really nice. But yeah, so to go back to those Kickstarter ads, we could certainly hire somebody. And when we are on Amazon now, we actually work, our Amazon account is handled through our consolidator, PSI.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when there's advertising, they do advertising for us. It's a little
Mhm.
bit of a different system. Amazon advertising, you're not creating your own copy. You're not, you're just basically putting your product in a position on the page along with other products where,
Mhm.
it just is sponsored, and so
Yep.
there's different, but whether, what kind of, keywords you use for that kind of sponsorship, how you're bidding, that stuff is all still controlled by somebody. And it's been
Mhm.
tough to hand that over because, we have very strong opinions now that we've done all the Facebook ads on you know, what keywords should go into that. Should it be board games, such a generic term? Should it be
Mhm.
2-player games? What about, if we're board games is a pretty high markup for the cost per click, because you're competing against so many other games. And so is it worth it to share that space with so many other companies, or should we go for the niche,
Mhm.
2-player game stuff or more like that? So it's been tough to hand that over to other folks. But at the same time, it does afford us time to actually make games, which is
Yep. Yep.
also important.
That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned to me that at Gamma that you've sold over 45,000 units of this game. You've self-fulfilled about 4,000. You said to the U.S. You had like 6,600 backers. You had and you've had a really, from all external signs that I can see, a very successful run so far that a lot of people listening to this would love to replicate. So, how did you go from a Kickstarter of 6,000 units to, or whatever the number of units
Yeah.
you sold were, to 45,000?
So yeah, it was once we finished with the Kickstarter, the big question mark is sort of like, what do you do next? And I think a lot of people have that question mark in their head, like you
Yep.
do all of this work to create a crowdfunding campaign. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be in retail stores or distribution or anything like that. And so all this legwork that you did, all of this setting up, you're now very good at creating crowdfunding campaigns, and congratulations, that's important. But
Mhm.
you don't have any of the rest of it necessarily in line.
Mhm.
And so then that was, um, we very fortunately, I mean, one of the biggest plugs that I have to make is for being a really active member in the community, because people will help you. Other publishers, other designers are so giving of their time. Um, I've experienced it. I mean, I've had plenty of, awesome publishers and creators guide us through the process. People like you who go on to podcasts and then, give away information about how to run Kickstarter ads. There are people certainly who, you can partner with for these things, where you're paying them so that you can get back to the things you love to do, like game design. But for us, we wanted to understand the whole system front to back. Um, and so once we finished our Kickstarter campaign, the next question was, okay, so how do we get into distribution? What does that look like? And so we looked into all of the distribution and consolidation options. We started going to Gamma. We went in the weird 2021 year where they had a virtual Gamma, which was both a weird experience and a great decision because so few people were there, so few other publishers were there, that we got to talk with, consolidators and distributors from all over in a less crowded space. And so that's where we started interacting with PSI. I eventually signed on with them to do consolidation. And so I have to say, direct sales are great. And I know people. So Sam and Gwen of Runaway Parade Games, they do Fire Tower. They are just, I think, slaughtering it in the direct sales category. They go to all the conventions. They have probably taught people to play Fire Tower 100,000 times. And
I've seen it at conventions myself.
Yeah, pretty much for forever now. So there is a path to doing direct sales. It takes, what they do is they go to a lot of conventions. And so, and they also handle their own Amazon page. And so you can do direct sales and you can make it worthwhile and profitable. From my perspective, there's a little bit of a trade-off. It is much, much less time consuming and much easier to hand that off to something like distribution or consolidation. And so if what you want to get back to, instead of going to all these conventions, some people love that lifestyle. I kind of love it. I really love, especially the industry facing ones like Gamma and stuff, the Proto Atlanta, Unpub, stuff like that. But a lot of people don't want to, can't afford to be traveling all the time, can't go away from family. For those people, that's where consolidation and distribution comes in. And there are a few partners in that space that you can work with. Some lower touch and higher touch operations where you're going to be either you're going to have a leg up, but you're still going to be doing a lot of the legwork yourself. Or, PSI is a very low touch operation for us. They pitch for us. They pitched us to Target. They pitched us to Barnes and Noble. We got to be a part of the Barnes and Noble pitch. But they talk to distributors for us. They handle our Amazon account. They do our advertising for our Amazon account. They do all of our distribution or fulfillment for retailers, for all of those spaces, international distribution. So having that low touch partner has been very helpful. That is, different consolidators and distributors have different levels of what kind of people they're willing to work with. A lot of them will only work with people with a certain number of titles. We got very lucky because we came in, I think we sort of like edged our way into this during COVID, because if you remember COVID times, there was a period where people couldn't get their hands on anything. Everyone was buying everything in the stores, everything online, and then nobody had any stock for anything, and people were desperate to have something to sell. And so we were bringing over like 13,000 games at the moment that everybody needed stock. And so the combination of PSI being like, oh yeah, here's something we could sell, and then also Barnes and Noble picked us up at the same time, and they were like, great, we'll take all of it, please. So I think we got very lucky with our timing. But in general, what those partners are looking for is that you have already created the demand. That's really the big thing in all this whole board game space, is nobody's going to create the demand for you. It's really, really, really up to you to create a game that people like, that's unique, and to tell people why it's unique, and to drive that demand. And it's not, people aren't gatekeeping you for the most part because they don't think your game is good or anything like that. What they want to see is they're running a business, you're running a business, is what you have marketable. And so we got just under the wire, I think, with PSI, that we had enough in our Kickstarter campaign that made it an appealing proposition to them. Even though we only had one product. And also at the time we lived in Georgia, and they were in Georgia. And so it makes it a little bit easier to do business that way too. But there are other consolidators, other distributors. Since our Kickstarter, probably about 80%, maybe closer to 90 of our sales have been through PSI in one way or another, either through Amazon, through Barnes and Noble, through distribution. And probably another 8% ish has been international language variations, people who picked it up for other languages. And then probably 2% direct sales.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to take
So
a
I'm
guess.
one of the 2%.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
You
excellent.
are.
Yeah, so that's really, really fantastic. I want to circle to back to a topic that you mentioned briefly about creating demand. This I feel is extremely, extremely important, and probably one of the most important concepts that we'll talk about on this podcast that I could talk about at all. So thank you for bringing it up.
Sure.
So creating demand, there's a story that I remember, that I recall back to. I had a very we'll say a very large client, not in the board game industry, and my responsibility was to run Facebook ads. This is back in like 2015 to 2020 or so. I worked for this client for about 5 years, and it was really hard, high stress, high paying client. And they had like an as seen on TV product. And so we would sell, I managed a Facebook ads, a Google ads budget of about $20,000 a month. And it would scale to like $80,000 during, holidays and, like quarter four.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this incredible upsell system and everything like that. So my job was to sell as many of the $59.95 product as I could, because half of those people would upgrade to the $130 product, and there's a $200 product that does all the things that they would want, and etc. So our ads we would run were for the brand name, dominantly for the brand name. And the CEO came to me and said, okay, look, we have Walmart here, Costco here, Target here. I want to dominate this page, like the search engine results page, for my brand name. I want all 10 results to be my company, even though they've sold to these other companies that are trying to consolidate back and sell only direct and whatnot. And so I spent a ton of money on their brand name. And the only way to know about a brand name is if you've heard of it somewhere else. You're not going to be like, I wish, it was like a product for older people to hear their TV better. And people are going to type in like a non-branded term, but they will never type a branded term unless they're driven to do that from some other marketing, right?
Yeah.
From some, like, I saw it on a store shelf, whatever. And so there are these things that I split the concept of, creating demand. So you have marketing campaigns, I'll just call them in the most broad sense, that drive demand. And then another type of marketing campaign captures demand, or rather captures the fruit of the demand that you create.
Yeah.
So your email marketing campaign for a Kickstarter is the one that drives the demand. And then your Kickstarter campaign captures the demand. So you're like, wow, my Kickstarter funded really well, but you had no money coming in when you were building emails, and the money only comes in during Kickstarter. That's probably the easiest example. But what I found was that the drivers of demand were not my Facebook or my Google ads, but they were magazine drops. Like they had a bunch of like Parade magazine and all sorts of other magazines and neighborhoods and whatever. And when they would do a big magazine drop, the sales would spike. And my job was to be in the right place at the right time with our ads to take advantage of that spike, so that we made the sales and not Costco or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to what do you find drives demand? Like, I know we're talking capture demand, like people go to Amazon and search for it and buy it, but what drives demand of your product?
I think you're asking me a question I haven't thought consciously about very much, so forgive whatever is about to come out of my mouth. But I guess when I think about it, I feel like a little bit of everything that we do is the driver of demand. And I think I think you kind of come onto a key point, is that a lot of people finish up their game, they finish their Kickstarter or whatever, and then they put it up on, Amazon or on Facebook or something like that and try and just capture. And that doesn't tend to work really well, because there isn't that second component that's the drive. Now, I think the ads do drive a little bit, right? Like people who see our ad on Facebook and don't click on it, it's still one touch, right? They still see it and think about it for a second and have a little bit of brand recognition, maybe. I think for our specific product, one of the things that really helps, and don't have a copy super handy right now, but we have a pretty unique looking box that goes very away from what people traditionally always say is right for board games. They always say like big, saturated, colorful art for the cover, and we went completely desaturated and almost no art. So it's just like this, like sort of sepia tone pencil sketch and then words
with very interesting typography on it as well.
Yeah.
It's like somebody type, like a typewriter's type.
Yeah, and what we found in general is that creating that intrigue, at least for us, because it's a game about intrigue, that has worked really well. So like when we first got into Barnes & Noble, we were all really, really excited. We went to the Barnes & Noble to see it on the shelf, and then we got distracted and we're looking at other games. And in the process of us looking at other games, we saw multiple couples come by, look at our game on a huge shelf of many games, pick it up and go, oh, this looks interesting, and then turn it over and go like, oh, and then walk away and buy it. And I was like, this is some sort of bizarre setup. This is like Ashton Kutcher's pranking us right now. Kind of like, why are these people doing this right in front of us, right as we are here? But part of the drive for the demand was creating intrigue for us. But I would say to me, every other part of it does it too. I think you drive demand by being a good interactive member of the community, by people within the board game space knowing that you're giving of your time. And to me, I mean, board game people are board game people. So every time that I help somebody else with their board game, that's another person who understands the values of our company, who then if somebody says like, oh, I was looking at this board game, Mantis Falls, that person will go like, oh, I actually know the people who make that. They're really stand-up members of the community. Like even little things like that to me are drivers. And they accumulate over time. Anytime you're present at a convention is a driver, because you take up space in somebody's visual field. So there's that component of it. I think things like this, like interviews, I think, to be selfish, let me tell you why I'm here after all. But
check the show notes.
I know, right? Yeah. Maybe cut this part out. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but that's legit.
Yeah, no.
I hope you sell stuff for
everybody. Everybody who's watching, ask Andrew for an interview. This is how you're going to get your game sold. So,
just have something interesting to say, and I promise I will interview you.
Right. So, I mean, I view it as a little bit of everything. When we had an interaction just today where somebody in the UK months ago had asked me to check back in with them, a retailer, check back in with them when we were back in stock in the UK. And I put it on my like little to-do list, and pushed it out. And then I just talked to our distributor in the UK, and I heard that they have stock in. And so then I got back to this person, and that person was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing customer service, right? So now that's a retailer who's going to bring our game into their store. And then when they're making recommendations about 2-player games, might be more likely to say, oh, hey, here's this one we just got back in stock, because, that kind of customer service sticks out to people. People like good people to succeed. And if you can be a good person in the industry, they're going to want you to succeed. And the reverse is also true. If you behave in unpleasant and deplorable ways, it will come back on you. So I think I view those drivers as aside from just the, creating brand awareness and presence all over the place, I view it as a very big holistic picture of now that we're in in the kind of a world where people can know more about you and your personality and your company than they ever could before. Part of that is you selling the whole package, which is who are you and why do they want to support you?
That's fantastic. I love so many of these things that you shared. So I wrote a list of the things that you said as I understand them in my head, and I would share the first and probably one of the most powerful demand drivers out there is a customer asking, what's that?
Mhm.
What's that? That's an extremely powerful demand driver. And so you mentioned that you have a box cover that has a desaturated look. We talked about the simple type, the reduced art, and the minimal art and minimalistic art, and that simply gets people. I remember back before I got into marketing at all, I was selling vitamins at like isotonic vitamins at back in the day. And I was going, I just finished wrestling and everything, so I had the functional understanding of nutrition without the science. But I knew if I do this, if I do that, it works. But so I started selling vitamins because it was a natural. I don't know, like I wanted to start a business somehow, and I had no money, so multi-level marketing it was, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned from that experience that simply having your stuff out on a counter, people would ask about it, and you would be able to talk about it. The one who asks the questions in a conversation has the power and leads the conversation. So if you simply get people to ask questions about your product, then you get to talk about your product, and they're going to ask more questions about it, and so on. So hopefully,
we actually weirdly did that with the back as well. And this part was not intentional. After our campaign, I sent a copy to Dice Tower, and Tom did an unboxing. And one of the things we'll remember this for all time. He flipped it over and he looked at the back and he was like, "Oh, completely wasted opportunity. Why would you not put your components on the back? Like show a picture of the layout." I think that's actually worked really well for us. I think people get intrigued by the front. They're like, what is this game of trust? And then they turn it over and they get the whole story on the back. Mob Ruled Town. You can't make it alone, but you won't be alone. And that's good news, right?
Yeah.
And it shows these two people walking on a street. It lists the components, but you don't see what's in the box. You don't see a picture of the layout or anything like that. So if people want to know, I mean, everyone's got smartphones. They can look it up. But then it creates this further intrigue, what's in the box. So the front creates the intrigue, what's on the back creates the intrigue, what's in the box. And it's the same as that one sentence, one paragraph, one page idea. Everything should lead to a question about the next thing. You want
That's a
people,
very powerful lesson.
Yeah. If people are making the journey on their own, it's like Inception. Like you're not the one driving that idea. You create this desire in them to make that journey. And that's going to be the thing that translates to people actually wanting to buy your product, is if they feel like they made that decision themselves. The more they feel like you are trying to make them do something or trying to make them make a decision, people hate that. People hate feeling like you're trying to sell them or you're wanting it too badly. The same way, I mean, to tie it all back in, the same as the witch hunt thing, where my husband would say, here's the reason why you need to vote for this person, and let me explain it all. The moment people can feel him trying to push them to make a decision he wants, they'll rebel and they'll say, no, you're trying to convince me too hard. Same with sales. You can't convince people too hard. You have to intrigue them to let them make that journey on their own.
Yeah. People hate being sold to, but they love to buy. That's how I've heard it spoken. So now you also mentioned Facebook ads for awareness. And I will say with my own, I've sold we're under 100 units left of Deliverance at this point, and all of them have been sold direct. I've sold through 2,000 units in the last couple of months, just direct, and or about 2,200. And it's the awareness that Facebook ads have with retailers asking me for the game. It's because customers are walking in asking them for the games, and then they contact us saying, hey, can we buy 6 units or whatever, because they have customers asking. That's probably been that's actually probably my greatest personal surprise from our own marketing, is that how Facebook ads have driven retailers to reach out to us and buy direct. And then you had mentioned positive customer service interactions, if we get back to people right away and other things like that. Like we've had this one little store in Greece take almost half of our stock that was in the EU and sell it, and they're just like buying it 6 games at a time.
Is it Michael?
Time, 9. No, actually, no.
Okay.
Just some little nobody that was like.
I was gonna say Michael. I always say Reftopoulos. I don't think that's actually the way to pronounce his last name. But, He is the only store in Greece that I know of, and I know he takes a
Yeah.
lot of stock, especially Kickstarters.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But so then you said interacting with the community, kind of being known as a helper and a positive influence. That actually, for crowdfunding nerds, that's a major driver of sales, because we'll have people that have never interacted with us recommend us because we are helpful in various communities. And just I wrote a comment or whatever, somebody asked a question about marketing, like, oh, you got to talk to Andrew, or you should talk to crowdfunding nerds, and
Yeah.
that's very helpful. So
Well,
you
and
also mentioned
even for honestly for sales of games, like the amount of people that I know that are really serious board gamers who have dabbled in making their own game, it's huge. Even if they don't go seriously to, on pubs and stuff like that, there's a lot of people who have played around in that space and who find that compelling. And those people tend to be really interactive in the board game community, not just in the creator community, but among, like people who play. And so if you're an open giving person within that community, that's still more positive influence you're having on the board game community at large. And that does come back. Yeah.
Yep. I have, if you're watching on video, I've got like 150 games behind me. So I'm a consumer of
I know. I was
board
going to
games.
say the amount, once I started doing Kickstarter, the amount of board games that I accumulated was pretty epic, but it's all business expenses, which is the important thing, not
That's right.
taxable.
My super backer status is business expense.
I know. Yep.
Oh man.
Mine too. Yeah.
So then you mentioned also interviews, and I'll also say that reviewers, that can be a huge driver as well of demand, where if you mentioned Tom Vassell, him getting to review your game, and interviews like this, like podcasts. I had a couple left, which was like awards with like a question mark. I think we got to Market Planet Unknown when they were nominated for the Spiel, Kenner Spiel de Jahres, and they had a ton of sales right afterward on GameFound. They had like 8,500 backers, and a lot of other exciting things happen. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, like educated customers, or like you had mentioned, like educated retailers, people that are educated about your game can sell it. There's this concept that I find is a very, very powerful driver of demand, which is tribal marketing. If you kind of have a tribe of people that you develop into a community, you connect with your direct customer in a Facebook group, a Discord community, your email list, that kind of thing. That is a very, very powerful source of demand, especially direct. So
we have a guy in our Reddit community who has been the craziest, greatest advocate of Mantis Falls. So anytime anybody on Reddit ever asks, what about hidden traitor games, or what are good 2-player games, or whatever, he has a list of like 10 of his favorite games and game companies and stuff, and he always includes us. And so every single Reddit post that's like, I'm looking for a recommendation for a game. I don't know how he is so on top of all of these that he sees. I mean, I don't see that much stuff on Reddit, like how he sees them all, but you're totally right that those people who become your really hardcore activists who are promoting you as a company, as a game, the amount of influence that they have in how your game flourishes in the world is enormous, disproportionate with what people would actually think. Yeah. And so those communities are critical. And honestly, I'm terrible about that. We have a Discord community, we have a Reddit community. I should do a better job of keeping those things up. It's very hard to do alongside everything else. And that's one of the places that we start to struggle is, once you start doing it all yourself, it gets hard to do every single thing as well as you ought to.
So Julie, how can people connect with you, and where can they pick up Mantis Falls?
So if you go to mantisfalls.com, you'll be able to get a copy. It's also available on Amazon, but don't give them your money. Give us your money. So you'll get, if you buy through us, then you get a little free strategy guide that also has like a comic at the back of it. So you get a little bonus for being a direct supporter. And they can connect with me anywhere. Facebook, all the big Facebook groups, Board Game Design Lab, all those kinds of things. They can email me, info@distantrabbitgames.com. And phone even is fine. I certainly don't mind if anybody ever needs help getting their legs underneath them for a future campaign, I'm always glad to give advice on that front. I talk to people all the time. I drive a lot, so it's nice to just be able to sit there with my, headphone in and talk to somebody about how to do the same for themselves that we were able to do. I mean, it was honestly a complete dream come true for us to have this game that we absolutely adored, that was just ours for so long, that people have seemed to come to cherish in the same way that we did. And so there's nothing like having that experience, that catharsis of seeing your art pay off and be appreciated, that makes you just want it for other people. Like, it's so heartbreaking to see people who make amazing games who don't make it on something like Kickstarter, or, aren't able to make a go of it. Because it's, so often it's not because the game is not worthy of it. It's these silly external factors like marketing that are irrelevant to the quality of your game for the most part, but do matter in terms of you actually being able to reach people. So yeah, I'm glad to help out folks in any way that I can.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Juli, for joining us on this podcast. It was really, really awesome. I'm going to listen to this again myself there was a lot of wisdom shared. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah. So,
it's only paying you back for all the wisdom that you shared back in the day. So
that's awesome. That virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
I'll take
it
credit
is the way
for
of
it.
board games.
Very good. Well, then I guess we're long on time, but I appreciate all of that wisdom that you gave. Robot Richard, do your thing.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.